Let's take a look at shares of Alphabet. They're currently moving actually to the upside here, up just about 0.5%. The move coming after Bloomberg reporting that the Department of Justice will ask a judge to force a tech giant to sell its browser Chrome due to antitrust concerns. Here with more on the implications for Alphabet and big tech, we want to bring in Rebecca Haw Allensworth, a Vanderbilt Law School Associate Dean for Research and Professor. It's great to have you here to weigh in on this. So yes, this involves this potential sale here of the Chrome browser, but that, of course, is not all. When you take a look at some of the other implications here, or what we're seeing this push here from the DOJ, they also want to impose data licensing requirements, also parts of its AI business. I'm curious just to get your reaction to this.
Yeah, so this is not very surprising. This is just the government's ask in the Google case. So we don't know what the judge is going to impose yet. And I see some of these as relatively unlikely, but it makes sense to ask for more than you think you're going to get. Maybe you hope the judge is going to split the baby somewhere in the middle. And I happen to think that the data sharing part might be the middle. That might be the thing that they actually get. Maybe not the spinoff of Chrome.
How big of a deal is this, especially considering where the Department of Justice has looked across some of the strategic acquisitions that major and big tech companies have made in order to make sure that they can grow their business in ways that were innovative at the time, but now are being challenged?
Well, it's a two-edged sword. I mean, you grow your business, you become more innovative, but you also make it harder for other people to compete, which itself impedes innovation. So there's a balance here. And I think that these lawsuits reflect the idea that the balance has been struck too far for too long on the side of companies doing whatever they want and on the side of big tech becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So the idea is just to recalibrate, I think. I think this is not saying, no more mergers, no more innovation by these big companies. The idea is to just make a little bit more of an even playing field for the sake of even better innovation.
What do you think the strategy is going to look like under a second Trump term? Because this case was initially brought by former President Trump under his first term, of course, continued under the Biden administration. Do you see that changing at all this time around?
It's so hard to say. I think like so many things about the incoming Trump administration, we just don't know. Mm-hmm. As you said, on the one hand, they brought this suit in the first place, so it would be very strange for them to kind of flip-flop and back off. On the other hand, this anti-big tech sort of strong antitrust enforcement is really associated with Biden's brand, which Trump is trying to distance himself from, and he's cozied up to some elements of Silicon Valley. So we just really don't know how this is all going to net out. The other point I'll make is that Trump doesn't really care about this stuff. He could hand it off to somebody who has a totally different agenda, and it's just not kind of core to his, I think, purpose.
Rebecca, if we were to see a forced spinoff, I think the question, and I know you're saying that maybe that is not likely, but the question is who would be the buyer? Who would be the buyer given these antitrust concerns?
Well, I think it's unlikely to be another big tech company. I think that would sort of, be a step sideways. But as far as who a buyer would be, I think it'd be very hard to say at this time who that would be. But, I don't think it's going to be Microsoft. I don't think they're going to let Apple take it, for example. This would just sort of recreate the problems that the suit is about.
Do you think this would cause a more seismic shift in how companies evaluate deals if there is a risk that there's one administration that might be seen as pro-deregulation and pro-deal-making, just to have that deal then later on challenged if there is another changing in thinking about some of the acquisitions that are being made? And typically it is some of the larger tech companies that have some of the cash on hand to throw around in these instances.
I think this whole antitrust reform movement, absolutely, it's going to affect the behavior of big tech. But I don't think it's a flip-flop. So I think this movement is here to stay. It started with Trump. It was continued with Biden. It's happening in the courts. Remember, the courts are the ones that really have the power to do antitrust policy, and it's changing. And big tech will be paying attention to that. So I don't think it's a one administration, another administration problem. I think this is a real change that on some level is here to stay. It's just a little unclear right now on to what extent.
Interesting. Rebecca Haw Allensworth, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Professor at Vanderbilt Law School. Thanks so much for taking the time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Certainly.